Our next speaker is Devon Assael. She's with WaterIQ Technologies. The last speaker talked about getting rid of the invasives in our lake. Now we're going to tackle the algae. It's only fair to give equal time for that. So we're going to be talking about using ultrasound to fight HABs and algal blooms. How many lakes, by show of hands, how many lakes are using ultrasound? Okay, I'll leave my hand up because we are. Okay, Tupsaw Lake. All right, but let's turn it over to Devon. All right, all set, Devon.
I would say welcome to you all, but I'm not there, so thank you for having me. My name is Devon Assael. I am with WaterIQ Technologies. I have been using ultrasound to help lakes and bodies of water combat algae issues since 2009. I'm going to give you a little bit of history about it. So I've done a little bit of homework on your group and also some of the harmful algal bloom issues that are going on in New Jersey. I do live in Connecticut, so not that far away. Have done some work in New Jersey, but similar climate, similar algae issues up here in Connecticut as well. So I'm very familiar with the area and everything that people are dealing with. So there's my contact information on the bottom. Alan also has it. I'll have it at the end as well. But if anybody has any questions, you can always feel free to reach out to me directly. I just mentioned to Alan, this was set up for me to do about 30 minutes and then a Q&A. But if you have a pressing issue or a pressing question, feel free to interrupt, raise your hand, and then just yell out the question. I'll try to go through it. I know we have a short amount of time to go over a lot of information. So I'll try to keep it concise. If you can't hear me in the back, let me know and I'll try to speak as loud as possible. So can everybody hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, awesome. All right, so what's going on, right? Why do we have these harmful algal blooms? We all see the headlines. Doesn't matter which news outlet you're listening to every morning, or which newspaper you're listening to, or which website you're going to, but algae is an issue and it is worldwide. I don't know of any places that have a river that look like this, picture up on the left-hand side, but it does happen a lot like that in Florida. So it is a problem everywhere, and states are now starting to really siphon out millions or billions of dollars to help fight these harmful algal blooms. This is New Jersey's site. So there's a whole division now specifically for HABs. So if you're not familiar, HABs is harmful algal blooms, right? We've had to acronym everything. But this is now a whole thing, it has a link, the governor's initiative. There's a lot of money from the state that's going out to different lakes and associations in order to help fight these harmful algal blooms. One of the great things you can do is look into grant programs to pay for some of these. So if you do have a lake that has an issue and you need to get some funding, grants is a way to do it. I'm not a grant writer, but I can help at least navigate through some of that for you. But there's money out there to combat these harmful algal blooms because it is a major issue. One of the biggest states that has these issues is actually Ohio. So right smack dab in the middle of the country, coming off of the Great Lakes, has one of the biggest harmful algal bloom problems, second only to Florida. So why? Why are we having these harmful algal blooms? Now, I give you a disclaimer. I am not a biologist. I am not a scientist. I have been involved with the ultrasound, like I said, since 2009, and I've learned a lot, but I don't have a degree in biology. So if there are questions that you ask that are a little bit beyond my expertise, I may not know it, but I will certainly find out. We have an amazing team. Unfortunately, our CTO was unable to also join. He is the expert in some of the biology problems, or the biological, if you will, problems. But so if you have a question specific to that, I will find out if I do not know the answer. But why are we having these problems? Well, we have a lot more shallow water bodies. We'll talk a little bit about why algae is growing. Nutrient problems is probably the #1 issue. We have a nutrient overload into our lakes, and algae thrives on nutrients. And then intense storms. Here in Connecticut, we had 10 weekends in a row with rain. Was it like that down in Jersey as well? This summer was terrible. I have a boat. We couldn't even go out on it. This summer was terrible. So we have these intense storms that are washing nutrients into the water. And then we have great days like today where it's 80 degrees here in Connecticut. And this algae is going to be like, hey, it's October, but I don't care. I'm going to grow. So there's all of these other factors that are going into causing these harmful algal blooms into our water. The treatments that we have right now, for the most part, are just treatments. They don't solve the problem in terms of getting rid of algae completely. So we're going to go over what are some of the more common treatments for algae, but they don't they don't stop the nutrient load, they don't stop the storms, they can't predict the weather, all of those types of things. And so that's a bigger project. What ultrasound can do, though, is help combat it until bigger problems are solved. Again, so what are the harmful algal blooms doing? We've all heard the story about the dog that has either gone swimming or drank the water in a lake and has gotten sick, or unfortunately have passed away. Children, there's skin issues that go around there, stomach and liver issues if you happen to drink a little bit of it. So there's a lot of different issues with these harmful algal blooms. That's why they're called harmful. And so people are wanting to make sure that we're keeping our families, our kids, our environment, our pets all safe by reducing the harmful algal blooms and just getting rid of those toxins that are in the water. Now, not all algae that is in water is toxic. So there's a lot of testing that goes into it. You know, the DEP goes in, or we'll do the testing. I know with Cupstall, I know Alan mentioned that he's using it at Cupstall. They did their own testing. The state can shut you down. Has anybody had on a lake where the state shut you down for an algae bloom? By raise of hands, anybody? Okay, so they're doing these testing. They're taking the water samples and they're checking for microcystin toxins. And then they're saying there's a certain level, you can't swim in it. You get these big health alerts. So it's a problem, right? So ultrasound and other treatments are going to be able to reduce those toxins. But there's only one way to really know if it's toxic or not, and that is through testing in a lab. Don't just look at a green body of water and say, oh my gosh, it's a harmful algal bloom. There is more testing that goes into it. All right, so you're having these algae issues. What are we going to do about them? So nice little before and after picture. A lot of smaller bodies of water look like the picture on the right. Does anybody have that floating, gross, matted stuff on their legs? Lady in the front from me in the red, I think you raised your hand. Like everybody sees it, everybody has it. Anybody golf and see this on a golf course? Right? So these are, whether it's small or large, we are having to combat these algae issues. Most common algae control treatments, copper sulfate or chemicals. Most common one has probably been around the longest. A couple of lakes that I know of that have been using copper sulfate for 50 plus years to treat. Bacteria, beneficial bacteria is another way of helping to combat your algae problems. Aeration. Now there's difference between aeration and fountains. So go back to my golf courses. A lot of times you'll see the pretty fountains with the lights and everything, and it's spewing water up in the air, but that's not aeration. That's not necessarily aerating the water and putting the oxygen back in there to have the body of water do this biological process to have algae go away. So there are different differences. Dye and shade. Is anybody familiar with using dye? Actually, I think I saw on the NJ Cola website that is a recommendation. It's food coloring, basically. And what is it doing? It's blocking sunlight. Barley straw. Similar to hay. Does anybody see like big bales of hay on water? It's barley. It's eating up the nutrients in there. I have phosphate removal in here. We've all heard of Phoslock and some other treatments for reducing your nutrients in there. So that is the more permanent type of solution. It's very costly. It can last a long time, but that is helping with that nutrient issue. I do not have a lot of experience in it. I just know that it is used with it. And then we have ultrasound. So I'm going to specifically talk about ultrasound and then also a little bit about bacteria and aeration and how they all work together. So the ultrasound timeline is this. It has been around commercially since 2003. If you hear our CTO talk about it, ultrasound was discovered by accident in the early 1900s by using dynamite. So they were doing mining and using dynamite and throwing them in bodies of water to create these caves. And then the sound blasts were breaking down algae in the other side of the body of water. Now that is what he's found. I've never seen the actual reports of it, but it makes for a good story. That sound waves and blasts were breaking down algal cells. And then it started being used in a lab setting in the 1970s. We started in 2003, but just before us, there was a guy in the UK that had tulip nurseries, and he had these gigantic vats of water and wanted to figure out how to keep the algae out of the vats of water that he had to irrigate with. And he didn't want to use chemicals because he didn't want to kill his plants. And so he actually came up with the first ultrasound device that only had about 4 or 5 frequencies in it that he put into these big vats of water to break down the algae, no chemicals, and then he could irrigate out of it onto his tulip nurseries. That's how it originally started. From there, it expanded. We got involved with it in 2003 with a previous company, and then we've evolved, as you can see the timeline. First unit started with 16 frequencies, then we went to 79 frequencies. In 2024, our CTO made the jump to 2000, or I'm sorry, in 2017, our CTO made the jump to 2024 frequencies. WaterIQ launches our Pulsar family of products in 2021. And then just this month at WEFTech, which is a large trade show that we go to, we produced the first units that ever came out with 4,400 frequencies. Now, I don't know what those frequencies are. There's a dual bandwidth. I know the frequency ranges, and there's another slide on those, but I don't know exactly what those frequencies are. They're sliced and diced very tiny, and it's to get the exact precision of the algal cell. So I'll get to a slide of that in just a second. Any questions so far? Because I know I'm going kind of quickly. Okay. So how is the sound waves actually working? We always have this picture of an opera singer. There were some old commercials, I guess, Memorex commercials of an opera singer singing and shattering glasses of water. And so if you're singing and you're hitting a certain frequency with your voice, you can shatter glass, right? And then what we're doing is we're hitting this middle term here called the critical structural resonance of the algae cells. Now, you got to keep in mind, these are microscopic algal cells. So you'll see a picture of the next page, but we are hitting these CSR of these with these 4,400 frequencies. Different frequencies affect different kind of algae. So everything has a CSR to it, or this critical structural resonance, and different frequencies are going to be able to hit different type of algae. There's about 2 million different types of algae, 4 broad groups, which are blue, green, red, and golden. And then with all the subspecies, there's about 2 million different types. WaterIQ, our lab guy, his name is Reese. He's slowly trying to get through all 2 million in testing, but it's going to take a long time. So the units are generating these specific frequencies with low wattage. So we're very minimal power. And then we have these piezos, basically these speakers that are putting out the sound waves into the water, and the water is allowing them to travel throughout. Now, the sound waves coming out of the pulsar units can travel 120 acres. So it's 400 meters radially from the device, 400 meters out, that these sound waves will travel before they start to die off. And what the sound waves are doing is immobilizing the algal cell. And by doing that, we're disabling it from reproducing, from eating, getting its own nutrients to stay alive, and from floating in the water column. This is a blue-green algal cell. This is microcystis. And inside a microcystis cell are these gas vesicles. They are photosynthesizing in the water. If you've ever gone out 5 a.m., 6 a.m. in the summertime and you see the green layer maybe about 3 feet down in the water, but by noon when it gets hot, it's all the way at the top. Those cells are photosynthesizing in the water with the sunlight. What the sound waves are doing is actually collapsing those inside gas vesicles inside, and they can no longer absorb the air in order to photosynthesize and go up and down in the water column. They sink down to the bottom of the body of water, out of sunlight, which is one of their sources of food, and they die off. It seems simplistic, but that's what we're doing. We're disabling the cell from surviving, and it sinks down to the bottom and either just dies off and decomposes or becomes a food source for something else. Does that make sense? I see a lot of heads nodding. Okay. One thing to note is that we are not lysing the cell. So when you have harmful algal blooms, the term is lysing. If we were to burst the cell open like this, it would allow those toxins, if there are some, to come out into the water. But the ultrasound is also preventing the cells to get to full maturity where they would produce toxins. And it's not going to allow them to lyse and release the toxins into the water. Okay, so we're not bursting the cell, we're not exploding it. We're basically imploding it like deflating a balloon. It sinks down out of sunlight and dies off. Now that's for a blue-green algae. On a green algae, we are breaking the inside cell wall from the outside. So on this right-hand side you can see on the picture, it's collapsing on the inside. And we're doing basically the same thing. We're no longer allowing it to eat or waste or do what it needs to do to stay alive, and it starves to death and it dies off. So it's kind of a misnomer to say that we kill algae. Basically, what we're doing is we're disabling it from staying alive, and it's going to die off. It would die off eventually anyway. You have these cycles. We're just kind of speeding it up. But by doing this, we're also we're halting that reproductive cycle, so that cycle doesn't continue over and over again. All right, again, this is high level. There's a lot more that would go into it, like on a microscopic level, but this is the gist of it. Again, it seems a little bit simplistic when you narrow it down, but it is pretty simple when you think about it. What we also do, I said I would. Yep, go ahead, gentleman in the back.
In contrast to copper sulfate, where the cells are lysed.
Say that one more time, a little bit louder.
This is in contrast to copper sulfate, where there is lysing of cells.
That is correct. So when you're using copper sulfate, you're taking it from the outside in. So you're breaking out the outside wall, and the toxins are going to come out. Ultrasound, again, is affecting it from the inside out. So we're collapsing them like a balloon. So think of it like a hot air balloon. It's like a really, really thick outside wall. And inside a hot air balloon are all like these little helium balloons. We're going to pop those helium balloons with a gigantic blast of sound, but the outside wall does not. And so it just sinks back down. It's a weird analogy I came up with about 4 years ago. But with copper sulfate, it's a really quick burst on that cell. So if there is lysing, it's going to or if there is toxins, it's going to lyse out. Copper sulfate is not going to halt the reproductive cycle either. Ultrasound, to that point, ultrasound is a slower control. I say it's a slow, painful death for the algal cells. Copper sulfate is really quick. You want a quick fix, copper sulfate is going to do it, but it kills your water. It kills everything. And it's going to allow it to lyse if there are toxins. Good question. Any other questions? Does that help? I see a hand in the back.
What
about the fish?
Does it affect fish?
I will get to that. The short answer is no, but I will get to that in just a second. I mentioned I was going to get back to beneficial bacteria and aeration. One of the things that ultrasound does is it works very complementary to beneficial bacteria and aeration. Our CTO actually coined it the water trifecta. He feels that the best recipe for any body of water is going to be ultrasound, aeration, and beneficial bacteria. So by doing what we're doing with the sound, or with the ultrasound on the algal cells, we're actually allowing the beneficial bacteria to thrive, and as a food source, it's going to start to eat away at some of that other stuff. Some people will put beneficial bacteria in addition to the ultrasound if there's not enough natural in the water. This is just another picture of a green algae. And again, frequencies are the key. Different frequencies are affecting different type of algae. So we have 4,400 frequencies going out into the water. It takes about 50 minutes to rotate through all of those frequencies in the units. And in this one, we're actually hitting, in the green algae, this thylakoid. Very similar to those gas vesicles in a blue-green algae, we're affecting the thylakoid inside the green algae. So just different image. Our particular units, again, are called the pulsars. They're dual bandwidth. There's another slide that has the actual frequencies in there. We don't program them. All right, so what you get in this picture is the unit. Physically, it's only about this big. And it goes, again, 120 acres. No, you don't have to program it. You don't have to set the frequencies. Nobody can actually tell you which exact frequencies of those 44 are going to affect an exact type of algae. Like I said, there's 2 million different types. Sunny-desmus is one type of green algae, and I think there's like 50 subspecies of it. Do I know which exact frequency hits the Sunny-desmus with like 6 different additional scientific names? I do not. So we have a range of them. So we don't program it. We want to be able to control as much as possible. This is an image of Lambeau Field. This kind of gives you an idea of the range. So green algae for a pulsar 4400 will do about 17.5 acres. For a blue-green algae, 120 acres. We do have a smaller unit. So for your smaller bodies of water, or for some pockets or coves, we can put the smaller unit in. Does anybody know what lake this is down on the lower right-hand side? Alan. This is Cupsall, yep. So they put 2 4,400 units in, one in the south, one in the north. I have a couple more slides on this. But one thing that we also have to keep in mind is that the units are line of sight technology. So it has to be a straight line. So they had this little cove up here with like a peninsula. So they put a smaller unit up there. If there's bends or islands or other blockages in the body of water, you may need multiple units to get around them. We use it like a flashlight analogy. If a light beam can't get through a bend or in a nook and cranny, neither can the sound waves. The different types of markets that we go into, we're really limited to, we can't do the oceans and we can't do the Great Lakes, but anything else we can do, enclosed bodies of water. Oh, and we can't do rivers. So flowing water is really difficult. As I mentioned, it does take time, minimum of 24 hours to start affecting a blue-green algae cell. So we have some limitations that ultrasound is not as effective in, but homeowners associations, drinking water reservoirs, private residences, or HOAs, those types of places.
Question.
Yep.
What if you have like an inlet stream that flows through the lake? Is that something that would prevent the use of this?
So if you have a stream coming into a larger body of water, no.
47-acre lake with a stream coming in, that supplies probably 75% of our flow.
Yeah, but you're not turning the water over that quickly. So on a 47-acre lake, the retention time in that lake is great. So the stream itself, you're probably going to have a constant inflow if there's algae in the stream, but the units are going to break down anything that, because they run 24/7 in the water, it'll break down any kind of introduction, and you're not turning the lake over that quickly. What we couldn't do would be, we get calls a lot, like in California, they have all these canals, miles and miles of canals, and the water is just constantly running through it. That we can't do. But a stream into a lake should not be a problem. We could play with it, maybe put one right at the mouth of where that stream is. Most of our lakes like this have that issue.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, to the lady that asked about fish. I get this question all of the time. There are some studies out now that indicate, this is the study, so I'll go back to that in a second. But in lab testing, we put units in, so lab and field, we put units in with fish. Now, ultrasound has been used without getting the white papers done in catfish farms, shrimp farms for years. But people were asking, we want to make sure that it is lab tested, it is peer reviewed, so that it has been done. The reason that we don't affect fish is that, remember we talked about very specific frequencies for the critical structural resonance. It's also a microscopic algal cell, and we're only using 50 watts of power. If we wanted to affect something that has billions of cells in it, like a fish, which is a more complex organism, we would have to change the frequencies and greatly increase the power. So a single cellular algal cell, a blue-green algae, we're not even popping that. We're just gently massaging it, and so it implodes. So in order to affect something greater, we would have to increase the power and change the frequencies. We did a study, a couple of slides in a minute, at Lake Okeechobee. So the next smallest one, types of organism similar to what like a green algae cell would be is a zooplankton. I think it was in 30 days of having a test site and a control site, we decreased blue-green algae by 67% and zero effect on zooplankton. And that was done with the University of Florida. So when you have, again, these small organisms like a zooplankton, they were not affected at all by the ultrasound. Does that answer the fish question?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a study, again, I can get you a copy, Alan. I don't know if I've ever sent it to you, but it was done last year. So it basically just shows that after 30 days, there was no avoidance behavior and there was no effect on the fish whatsoever. So this is the Lake Okeechobee project done by Dale Lappinghouse. It is being peer reviewed. So we just have some high level data until we can get the white paper published. But this was the lock that it was in. So Lake Okeechobee in Florida has 2 outlets, one river that then goes to the west side and one river that goes to the right side. This was going to the Port St. Lucie Canal, which goes out into the Atlantic Ocean. And we did the Pulsar 4000 in these mesocosms. So they were these square mesocosms that were the control site and then the test site. We had 3 that did not have ultrasound and 3 that did have ultrasound. So the ones with the ultrasound had a 65.6% decrease in the blue-green algae And the ones without ultrasound had a 34% increase in blue-green algae in the same month that we were testing it. And then there was no zooplankton impacted by the ultrasound unit at all. So just a couple of different before and afters. This is the 45-day private residence in Wyoming. I think this was about 4-acre lake. Had always had an algae issue, never could really figure out what the problem was. I believe it was Spirogyra that was in here. So we put the unit in, and the homeowner just went to the same place every other day, every few days, and snapped all these pictures, so you get a good time lapse. Now, he also did use beneficial bacteria in this lake as well. It wasn't very deep, so it was recommended that he use the beneficial bacteria to help with that shallowness. Ideally, ultrasound is going to be most effective with deeper lakes. If you have a lake, or no lakes are 2 feet, but if you have a pond that's only like 2 feet deep, it is going to be a little harder to control because you still have that sunlight that's going to hit it even when it sinks down to the bottom. So this one I think was only about 4 feet deep. So the beneficial bacteria was there to consume some of that dying algae that couldn't still thrive with the sunlight on the shallower areas. Another one in Wyoming was Teton Pines Golf Course. Now, we have been partnered with Audubon International. Audubon is, I don't remember how many courses they have, a few hundred courses, and they have a sustainability effort. These courses basically have to reduce their chemical footprint. And one way of doing that in their irrigation ponds was to use ultrasound instead of chemicals. And they are regulated in order to keep their Audubon certification. They have to submit algae samples on a yearly basis to show that they are doing this. So this is one of the ones out in Wyoming. Always had this problem with this one lake, and you can see the differences. Topsail. So we wanted something local. Everybody wants to know who's using it, that's close to us. So I believe that it was the first units were installed in fall of 2020. Put 2 units in. As I mentioned, the Upper Cove on the northern side did not have a unit in it to begin with. It was the second full season of ultrasound in 2021, and then the third full season was 2022. So I did ask Tom and Alan for a couple of quotes prior to knowing I was actually going to be doing this presentation. And it was, quote, the best clarity seen for July 4th. The old timers said they hadn't seen a lake like this in decades. I'm just going to say old timers, meaning they've been there for a long time. And this is one of the ones that had said to us that they had been using copper sulfate for about 50 years. And they've reduced the copper sulfate down, and only used it 3 times since the units were installed in 2020.
And
so
this year we didn't do any full lake copper treatments. We just did some spot treatment.
Yeah. And for the line of sight aspect, so again, we only did these 2 lower ones first. Now these are dock mounted, meaning that there are 2 homeowners that have them hanging off of their docks. We do have an option. And I just realized I don't think I have a picture of it in my presentation, but we do have a solar floating option. I can dig up a picture, but it is a solar panel on basically on a floating dock, that if you don't want to put it off of somebody's house, you can put it out in the middle. On a recreation lake, it's a little bit more difficult because you have to navigate around it. But if you don't have recreation on it, or if you don't have power boats, you just have like canoes and whatnot, you can put it out in the middle, and then it's self-contained. You don't have to worry about any power charges. They only again run on 50 watts of power. So the electric is minimal. It doesn't break the bank by any stretch of the imagination. But this year they did want to add the unit up in this cove because they did still see some algae sitting up there, which is not abnormal. That cove is probably a little bit more stagnant in water, not a lot of flow in and out. So they added another one. And then this was the additional quote that we got. I'll let you all read it, but I think it's really key that they had really good Secchi disc readings. In all honesty, I don't do Secchi disc readings. I never have, not personally, but a lot of people do. It's great, obviously, for the clarity. So it was really good information that Tom was able to provide. I was overly impressed with the spreadsheet that they used in terms of keeping their treatments, everything that's going on with the lake. So if you have questions about that for your own lake, then I encourage you to talk to Alan and Tom about it. It was great. The maintenance on these is minimal as well. About once a month, you just really want to pull it out of the water and wipe it off. Go ahead.
Devon, while you have that picture up, it looks like a strange picture with all those boats there. This is our annual lake swim. And the people in the front, who are on the dam, are gonna swim 0.8 miles to the other side of the lake. And the boats are there so that they can follow their passengers for safety. And just everyone met, in their last meeting, they met Maureen Jobrack, who gave a presentation. She does that 8.8 mile swim in 20 minutes. So
Wow,
it's also very strong swimmers. It comes on.
that's crazy. I can't swim that far. Go ahead, ma'am, in the back.
If you have an area of the lake that has a lot of growth in it, as we were talking about before, weeds and things, does this work in an area like that, or does it have to be a fairly clear area?
Good question. So going back to the line of sight or the flashlight analogy, if it's really thick, then the algae can still get hung up on those weeds, and the ultrasound will not be able to penetrate through the weeds. So if you have a weed regimen in process already with a lake management company or something, you probably still want to do that. It can help, but it will just be reduced a little bit. A lot of times, we'll be able to clear right up until the weed edge, and then algae will get hung up on top of it. Is a lot of times where you see it. So you would still have to manage your weeds. Ultrasound is not going to break down weeds at all. This is.
Want to talk about the cost of this?
I'm sorry?
Or you want to talk about the costs for this?
I will, yes. First, I got to tell you all the great things that it can do, and then I'll tell you the cost. This is another homeowner association out of Nebraska. So big, intricately shaped lake. Now, this is a one-way water skiing lake. So I don't know if you can see my cursor, but it kind of rotates around this island in a one-way. That's the only way that the boats can go. So I had to strategically place the units all over. You can see the before was in one of these little channels over here. Terrible, terrible algae. And they used aeration, bacteria, and I think they were treated with copper sulfate prior to us. They kept the aeration and the bacteria and introduced the ultrasound units in 2021. And this is where they've placed them. So they had 6 units. 3 of the smaller ones for the skinnier areas and 3 of the larger ones. And again, just a couple of before and afters. Lived at Ginger Cove for more than 40 years. The water quality has never been better than it has now. Last case study, and then we'll go back to a couple of the pricing issues or pricing questions. So we did also in a lab. So we don't just have anecdotal field experience. We actually hired a biologist and a PhD out of Texas A&M. He's now in Virginia. His name is Dr. Zimba, and he's doing all of our lab work. So we wanted to say, okay, put us in the lab, which I'm not a big fan of lab work because it is different, right? You don't have all the elements. You don't have those storms. You don't have those nutrient loads that we talked about previously of what is causing some of these harmful algal blooms. But if you want to know under a microscope, what is the ultrasound doing to the algal cell directly, you have to do it in a lab study. So we did it with the microcystis and the zooplankton. Microcystis decreased by 98.5%, and the zooplankton all grew in size and number. So back to the question about, what else is it going to affect? Nothing. People ask about safety. Actually, I think it was with Cupsol, there was definitely some questions and concerns about people swimming in it. I've been asked about pregnant people. I've been asked about people with pacemakers. I've been asked about children. It is perfectly safe to use it with all these things. Still going back to the low power of the units and the frequencies that we're using. Can you hear it if you're in the water? Not unless you're right up next to it and all you hear is a buzz, and that's just all basically the innards working. It does not affect fish hearing. The only thing that we haven't been able to prove is in Florida if it affects manatees. There's still questions about that, but it hasn't affected any children, any animals, anything like that from a hearing perspective. Doesn't hurt their ears. The units are registered, our company is registered with the EPA as a pesticide device because they didn't know where to put us. So we're in the pesticide device as a classification, but we definitely distinguish ourselves. Also, all of our units have UL certified electronical components and NSF approved for drinking water. So NSF is one of the strictest standards. You can't put anything in a drinking water reservoir unless it's NSF. And all of our components that touch water already have NSF approval. You're going to get all of these slides as well. So, all right, actually, I don't know if I have a slide in here specifically about pricing, but I will tell you what it is. So the Pulsar 4400 is the unit that will do 120 acres. It is $6,000 plus cable. We also have telemetry. So Alan can talk about the telemetry and Tom about the telemetry. So we added that this year, and it's been a game changer. What the telemetry is that we built in this feedback that goes to a dashboard. So when you have multiple units, like what Cupsaw has, they can pull up on their computer or iPad or iPhone every morning, log into a dashboard, and know that every single unit is on and working. The Ginger Cove Homeowners Association, they had an issue with one of their units last year that did not have the telemetry, that the homeowner that had it plugged into the dock was doing renovations and cut their power for 2 weeks and didn't tell anybody. So that ultrasound unit was off. The lake had an algae bloom right around that house. So now that after that happened, she's like, oh, you have telemetry on your units? We're upgrading all of them. So we do have this automatic feedback. It's 24/7 monitoring. If the unit were to go down, whoever's in charge of monitoring them, it does have an alert capability. If unit 1 goes down, you'll get a text message. Hey, make sure you go out. Maybe the power tripped. Maybe somebody unplugged it. Whatever the case may be. So we do have that redundant backup just to maintenance the integrity of the units. There is an annual subscription to that. It's only $500 a year to do the dashboard. So all in for one unit to treat 120 acres, you're looking at roughly $7,000. Now, if you want the floating system, it is $22,000. And then we do have a full water quality monitoring option as well. Does anybody have a need for outside monitoring for things such as pH, chlorophyll, specific blue-green algae counts? Does anybody have an interest in that? Because I can go over that. Yep. Okay. I think, well, before I find that slide real quick, does anybody want to scan? It goes right to our website.
I have a question while they're waiting.
Yep, go ahead.
So you have these units and they have different SAM frequencies and you're always testing other frequencies. So do you send updates to these units?
Just a small plugin.
That's a good question. I know that was discussed about whether we can update it through the telemetry. I don't think we have that capability. The increase in the frequencies is not so quickly that it would be like, not like your iPhone would update every couple of months. For us to go from 2024 to 4,400 frequencies took 2 years. There was no change in frequencies from 79 frequencies to the 2024 in 10 years. So, we're at a point, I think, with the frequencies that we're using that we're able to control as much as we can with the minimal power that we require. Once we start adding more frequencies, we do have to increase the power, and that just changes some of the things. So the power that goes from the power supply, which sits on the shoreline, down into the transducer head, the part that emits the sound waves, is 44 volts. So in order for us to increase that power with the additional frequencies, that starts to become unsafe. So I don't think that we have plans to do that, at least not in the near future. So we wouldn't need to do a change like that, probably for at least another 2 or 3 years. Yes, ma'am.
Can you confirm, does this handle Lingbia?
It does. So Lingbia is one of the ones that is a little bit more structured in its cellular makeup. It almost looks like tar when it gets to be really bad and it's really, really heavy. We can do it. It's one of the ones that you have to be very patient on. It can take 3 months to get through Lingbia. I do believe I have that as one of my frequently asked questions. So how long can I expect for you to, to wait to see results? Blue-green algae is about 7 to 14 days. Green algae, depending on the kind, can take 3 to 4 weeks, but Lingbia is one of the ones that's 2 to 3 months. It is, there's no perfect recipe, just like there's no perfect lake. Every lake is going to be different. I've always joked and said that ponds are like people. They're all different and slightly crazy. So you have to take into consideration your lake. There's not going to be another similar lake that's exactly like yours. So we really have to go down to what the algae type is in there. And then based on experience, I can say, okay, you've got Spirogyra, your lake should be clear, depending on how big and how bad it is when we start to install the units, your lake should be clear in a month. But if you've got Lingbia on the edges, you may see that linger just a little bit longer. Oftentimes, depending on the lake, the size, the nutrient load, and how bad it is, the second year is the best best benefit or the best visual that you're going to see. I mean, ask Alan, right? So we installed the units, I think late of 2020. I think it was like not until September. Then we went through a full second year, and it was the third year that the units were in. I believe they put them in June, end of June, right? Because you want them in a couple of weeks prior to 4th of July, and we go all the way through into October. Sometimes it can take a couple of years to get through it to see the best results. It does take time. It's not a quick kill.
Devin?
Yep.
But, don't read into this. I don't have $22,000, but how large are the floating units?
Physically, they're 6 foot by 4 foot.
Okay, thank you.
I'll pull up a picture. I'm gonna, let's see, stop share. Let me just go to my other PowerPoint real quick. I think I have it on here. Okay. So you see the PowerPoint again?
Yeah.
All right. So this is the solar panel. At the bottom, this is like the little picture of it here. This is the new design of it. And then this is a shore mounted solar panel. So we also have shore mounted ones. And then you have a cable that goes out. Our cable lengths go in meters. Longest cable you can do is 120 meters. So it's pretty long. It's 400 feet. But I don't recommend that. If you have to go that long, I would go with the floating solar option, but we can play with it. Every lake's going to be different. We do probably 95% of our research on a lake on Google Earth, because it's the satellite view is the best way to see, and I can actually go back over the seasons in case there's like trees in one picture I can't see a cove or things like that. So I do most of it on Google Earth so I can see what the lake looks like.
Question. On the,
Yep.
You said about being shallow areas. What about beach areas? Does it at least lower the concentration that if you would pass tests that you wouldn't be hitting for closing swim areas?
Yes. So if that's an issue, I would probably put one a little bit outside of the beach area, because the sound waves will go into that. If the entire body of water were only like 2 feet deep, it would be difficult to do. Plus, in a beach area with wind and whatnot, you do have algae going in and out of that area, just like the water would. So yeah, it shouldn't be an issue to be able to treat that beach area. I just wouldn't put the unit on the beach area, because you also want to allow the sound waves to get out into the water column. If you put the unit in 2 feet of water, you lose half of your sound waves immediately into the muck. The sound waves come out spherically. So it's not on a single plane. It goes up, it goes down, it goes out. So it comes out spherically. So you want to put it into some depth, ideally 4 to 6 feet minimum. I see it.
We have swim lanes that are, the floating swim docks basically that are about 100 feet long, and there's several of them basically makes a square. Would that area, water inside that floating swim docks, would that be able to?
So at Cupsall, we have a unit on the opposite side of the lake from the swim lanes. Now, Alan and Tom can let me know, do they have an issue in the swim lanes with algae?
No,
And that's a closed-in swim lane, Alan?
no, it's not closing, it's just a
It's
line.
like a floating dock straight out?
We have the docks going out, they're standing docks, then just swim lanes, but it's not enclosed.
Right, you see, ours is kind of square and enclosed, where it's basically a square box of floating dock.
Oh, I would have to look at it, but okay, so let's keep that line of sight concept in mind, that if I put the unit outside of that, and if it's an actual like wall that almost like a severed off pool, then it probably the sound waves would not penetrate into that area.
I mean, it's floating, so it's probably
How many feet
into
under
the
it?
water, so you do have, 6 feet below that.
Well, you can drop the units under. the units don't have to sit on the surface. I'd have to take a look at it, but there may be options to put a unit down underneath it. So again, if the sound waves are coming out spherically, they go up. So you can bottom mount units as well, and then the sound waves will go up and treat it from the bottom.
Because what's the price of the smaller unit you said for like a cove? Because that can go inside the swim lanes, I take.
That one's 5,000 plus cable, which if you have electric right there, then you're only looking at like a 5-meter cable. Hand way in the back and the left. Green shirt, maybe?
What is the optimal depth? You mentioned the shallow project. What is the optimal depth?
There's no magic on the on too much depth. So the sound waves will actually go down to the thermocline. So if you've got a lake that, let's say it's 100 feet, but your thermocline is at like 30, the sound waves will bounce off the thermocline and bounce back up. The deeper the better for anything, because again, we're dropping algal cells out of sunlight. That's really going to be about 10 feet. But there's no max depth for the units to work in. We have some units in diving reservoirs. So I have one in Pennsylvania at a place that a scuba diving company certifies their divers at this lake. And I think the depth is about 80 feet. So he has 2 units at the top and one that we dropped all the way down on the bottom to get rid of the cold water algae and better the clarity for the divers. But he had to get past the thermocline. I think his thermocline was at 40 feet.
Our lake has a very rough, uneven bottom. Trees, rocks, everything piled down. Does that affect it?
No, especially if it's deep enough. It shouldn't affect it. No, I mean, I would have to say how shallow is it? But no, if it's down 15 feet, it's not going to affect it at all.
Average.
Yeah, no, that shouldn't be a problem. Small obstructions, I'm going to say, like, let's say you had a tree stump, or let's say even a fallen tree that was coming up out of the water. Small obstructions like that shouldn't be an issue unless you had a lot of brush around it. Again, every case is going to be a little bit different. I have to see it in person, but it shouldn't be an issue. Columns on a dock is not an issue. You know, if you have a 3-foot pylon right there for the dock, that's not a problem.
Quick question on the, you know, it's a expensive equipment kind of sitting out there for long periods of time. Like, can you tell us anything about warranty?
Sure. Warranty. So the Pulsar units have a 3-year warranty. The water quality monitoring also has a 3-year warranty, and then the pontoons themselves have a 5-year warranty. They come with rechargeable batteries. Those are a 2-year warranty. Most batteries that are rechargeable only last 2 to 3 years anyway, but they do have a 2-year warranty on them.
So what's the battery replacement?
What's the cost of the battery replacement?
Yes.
They're deep, what they call deep marine cycle batteries. So they're about $150 a piece, and you need 2. They're boat batteries. I have to find, I thought this presentation had the water quality monitoring. So let me find one more. I have a lot of presentations.
The question here.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the solar unit that you were showing is $22,000 each?
Correct.
And is there a volume discount?
Yes, there can be, depending on how many we need. Yes, absolutely.
A shallow lake would need more devices?
No. The number of devices is going to be indicative of the size, right? So we have 120 acres to play with, but also the shape. So Cupsaw, because it's kind of long and skinny, we had the 2 units that covered the main water body, main part of the lake, and then we had that small unit at the top. The other one that I showed you, which was Ginger Cove, that has that big island in it. So it was 90 acres, which is about the same size as Cupsaw, but it had 6 units because of that gigantic island. The shallowness is not going to require more units. We just have to deal with how shallow it is. A 90-acre lake is not going to be 2 feet deep.
And you recommend
typically not a problem.
And you recommend complete coverage?
Yes. So good question. We get that all the time. Like, can we just try it on one area? No. Because we need a minimum of 24 hours of contact time to break down the algae with a blue-green algae, which is the easier one to kill. Unless I have the section that we're treating like blocked off, like a curtain or baffle of some sort, there's nothing keeping the untreated cells in the non-treatment zone from going into the treatment zone. So you're really not going to see the best benefit. Now we can do it in a cove. where if there's not a lot of water flow, we have done it successfully there. It's not optimal, but we can do it. I just have to look at what the cove looks like and how big the mouth is to see what that water flow is going to be. But yeah, ideally you do want to treat the entire body of water, especially if it's more symmetrically shaped. You don't have a lot of those nooks and crannies.
Thank you.
Devin?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Tom tells me that he finds it more effective if once in a while he goes out and cleans the faces of the units.
Yes.
He doesn't mind because he's always out there chasing these anyway.
Yeah, so every about month or so, month to 6 weeks. Now, the newest units do have a ceramic plating on the front that helps to prevent the gunk buildup. Anything that sits in water, right? How many people have boats, even if it's like a kayak, right? You let it sit in water for 2 days, it's got that slime on the bottom. So our units will have the same thing, but we did put this coating on the front of the piezos or the speaker part to help reduce that buildup. But about once a month, you just take a soft cloth to it, wipe it down, and put it back in. It's very minimal. Yes, sir.
This is a question to Alan, and really, when you compare today's cost for what you're doing, the lake management with how it was before, how much have you increased?
Yeah, when you think about it, it's a good question. When you think about it, since we don't use copper sulfate anymore,
Right.
full treatments, and it's kind of balanced out. I mean, we paid for itself in a couple of years. But the other thing with copper sulfate is it's self-fulfilling prophecy. You treat with copper sulfate, you lyse the cells, you release the phosphorus, and you get in 2 more weeks you need more copper sulfate. So this is a more permanent and a non-chemical treatment. So it's
muscles don't like it. So muscles don't like copper sulfate.
No.
Nothing likes copper sulfate. And so the average, now this is both for small bodies of water and larger bodies of water. If you are looking at both aeration and copper sulfate, the average ROI is about 2 to 2.5 years.
Thank you.
Yep.
So,
Yep, go ahead.
So if you're gonna put one of these, even the smaller unit, right? And if you're gonna put it near a swim area, beach area. Okay, now I know that ultrasonic has, just from experience, I know that there's issues with ultrasonic when it comes to hearing and creating headaches on people. And you're already having problems with manatees, which are mammals. So, like, do you recommend putting them in that area, or do you recommend putting them further out?
Okay, so I want to clarify, we don't have issues with manatees. We just don't know if there's any issues with manatees because we haven't put them in yet. Around where manatees would be. There's been a couple of coves that we wanted to try, but we just don't have the way of testing it to see if it's going to affect them. We've put them in swimming pools. So I guess a sensitivity to that would be person specific. I don't have a recommendation to not put them near a swimming area. Again, they do go in swimming pools. Some people would say that they would turn them off during swimming. Again, you can hear a bit of a buzz with them in, but that might just be a sensitivity per person. So I don't have a recommendation either way for that. I can try to find out more information if there's a standard, but I've never had an issue where somebody said that it caused headaches.
Right. Thank you.
So the lady in the white, I think in the front, she had some questions about the water quality monitoring. So we have a whole sustainable algae management system. So we have our WaterIQ cloud. This is the dashboard that will show you all of the information on your units that that they're working. They have the alert system, GPS location. We've had some issues with a lake here in Connecticut where, with the winds and the storms, an anchor broke free and went to the other side of the lake. And so by the GPS alert, they were notified in the morning that the unit was not where it was supposed to be based on the coordinations of when you set it up. So there's a lot of amazing like real-time feedback to it. Then we put the water quality monitoring, which is this probe down here. If I can make this bigger. And we have 2 different ones. We have a mini and we have our standard. So the mini, it's called the SenseIQ Mini, is going to be testing cyanobacteria, chlorophyll A, and temperature. So it just has 3 probes. If you really need a lot of details and data, and this is where the DEP and some of the universities, this is the kind of data that they're getting. Then you go into the conductivity, the DO, turbidity, ORP, and pH. It all gets housed onto a dashboard, onto the cloud, and you have these charts. I guess my question would always be to somebody like, what are you using that data for? I'm not sure that it's needed for everybody. It does increase the cost significantly. Those probes are extremely expensive. So that's a $55,000 solar panel unit. It's just, what is the data being used for? And if you already have that data, you'd have to check that ROA of having somebody else getting it versus you getting it on your own. Questions about the water quality monitoring? Well, what it doesn't do, and we're looking into it, it's probably a year in our R&D, is doing the phosphorus levels. That is a whole nother probe. It's a whole nother animal, and it's a whole lot more degrees than I have. It's very beneficial. I just don't know that every lake needs it as a homeowners association or a lake coalition. It just depends on what you're using the data for. So I think that covers, oh, go ahead, ma'am.
Yeah, so you talked about seasonal use. Is there benefit that you've seen for the full year?
Yeah, so if the lake freezes, we do recommend people taking them out, but you can also drop them below the freeze line. So we have a drinking water reservoir here in Connecticut that has a cold water algae issue. So while the surface freezes, they have a unit down at the bottom of their drinking water lake, and they control it that way. So yes, there is a benefit if it's a problem. If it's not a problem, we recommend taking them out. But if you do see that, it's a issue with a cold water type of algae, then yes, you can leave them in year round. You just don't want the ice to freeze around them. Just like you pull out a boat in the winter because it can damage a hull, you're going to want to pull these out. If the ice gets so thick that it's going to freeze around the unit itself. Any other questions? Yes.
You did show us the size of the solar, the floating unit. What is the size of the dock mounted one? Did you say that? Yes, sorry.
So it's a 4 foot by 6 foot print. Oh, the dock, I'm sorry, the dock mounted unit itself, this regular ultrasound unit. Hold on, I will show it to you.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
I'm gonna stop my sharing. I get to be really big again. Unblur. Excuse my messy office. And this is the unit. This is all the bells and whistles. This is the magic right here.
That is mounted right from a dock or a shoreline.
Yep. So it does come with a float. If you want to put it on a float, you can just suspend it on the surface of the water and anchor it in place, which we provide. Or if you want to dock mount it, it comes with this hook here. I don't know, Alan, how you guys did it, but you can just use a lot of times a piece of PVC pipe that you just drill a hole through, and then you attach it to the dock and mount it, halfway down to the water body. Everybody, again, every dock, every setup is going to be slightly different. But yeah, this is it. This is not a travel size. This is physically how big the unit is. This is what puts out sound waves for 120 acres.
Wow. Is the power attached to that?
I'm sorry?
How is the power attached to that?
So at the top here, there's a connection, and then you have your cable that goes onto it goes from the head cable to the power supply box. I don't have a power supply box here. It's called a NEMA box. It's I think it's 18 inches, 18 by 12 inches. And then it opens up, it's watertight, and has all the components on the inside.
And you just supply 120 volts to that power box.
That is correct. We also have 24 volt AC, and DC. So we have all different types of power. We came up with a 24 volt DC for golf courses. The AC, the AC was for the golf courses. The DC can also hook up to batteries. I don't recommend the battery one because you have to change them out every 7 days. It's a good to test, or if you have a temporary issue with electric, but we do have all different power options. The power supply box is a universal box, so it's 120 or 240. What we don't have is 480. So there are some like big aeration systems that run on 480, and that's the one thing we don't have. We would have to step it down.
If we wanted an estimate, there would be a recommendation for the optimal place to put, like,
Yeah, so we would just reach out to me, and we can schedule either another Zoom. My travel is a little bit difficult to get to New Jersey. I tend to go to Pennsylvania. I've limited my travel with a special needs daughter, but I do everything over Zoom and Google Earth. So I can certainly look at the lake and provide you with costing estimates and suggested placements. A lot of it will come down to who, if you're going to do a dock mounted option, who's willing to plug it in, if there is electric at the dock. Cost wise, again, to run it is like $40 a year. I mean, it's, well, maybe it's 80 now with the way that electric has doubled, but it's not that much. We had a homeowners association out in California a long time ago that the HOA just cut a check back to the homeowners out of the dues for the month. So there's a lot of different ways to play with it. And again, I encourage you, if solar is an option that you want to do, I would encourage you to look into the grant options. One, because you're reducing harmful algal blooms. The state of New Jersey is giving a lot of money for that, and two, it's solar, and there's a lot of money for solar.
Problem with grants for most of us, it's private lakes. You can't get grants.
Okay. We have a gentleman that's used to work for the state of Florida, and he is a grant writer. So I can also always have him look into things, if that is an issue or that question comes up, and if there's any way to play with it, I can solicit his help as well. And he's kind of like our state guy that works with the states, because he was with the Florida DEP, so he knows how to navigate a lot of the rules and regulations of various states. So I would get him involved if we need to. The units have been used in New Jersey in a variety of different ways. There are a couple of others out there. So it has been approved. WaterIQ has now gone through the whole process. We had to put in applications with the new company to be permitted by the state to do it, because we did some state projects. So that part's all been done. The state knows about us.
As far as the grants are concerned, Devon, Cupso applied for a grant, not for ultrasound, because that was cheap enough, but for watershed management. And when we tried to apply for that grant, because we're a private lake, we couldn't go forward with it. But by including the other lakes in town, the town was able to get the grant, and we got a $90,000 grant for a watershed management study done by Princeton Hydro, and that turned into a $200,000 grant put in a rain garden by one of our schools. So it's doable.
Oh, that's great.
Good.
I know we've worked with Princeton Hydro before too.
So, is Princeton your lake management company?
No.
Who are you using?
Chris Hanlon, he's got a new name for that.
Okay.
LMS, yeah.
And are they part of your managing your ultrasound now, or is
No,
that?
Tom is.
Tom, so that, okay.
Is it LMS?
What is your website? Can you tell me what it is?
Yep, it's WaterIQ Tech, TECH.com. Do you want me to, I can put the QR code back up if you want.
But my phone isn't smart.
Ah,
It's not a flip phone.
That's like this. It just doesn't work that well with that stuff. My phone's.
any other questions?
Yeah, right there.
You don't lease the devices, do you?
We can. So we have what's called the ACAS model, algae killing as a subscription. It's a very fancy term. And you can do a yearly subscription to them. We used to do a leasing or a rental program where it was a 3-month trial. We can discuss that again. It's on a case-by-case basis. So yes, we can do that. I don't have like a standard formula. A lot of it will also depend on how many units are required. The more units that are required, the harder a leasing would be. I believe, Alan, I think you guys did the ACAS model.
I think we did.
Yeah. The benefit to the ACAS model is it's a year long, and it's unlimited warranty. So if there was ever an issue, as long as you are using the units and you're doing the ACAS model, it's always an unlimited warranty. And somebody asked about upgrading the units with new frequencies. Any new versions that we would come out with that would have a major update, we would just swap them out. Yeah, all the way in the back behind Alan.
What cost is that? The cost of the leasing?
Yeah, off the top of my head, I don't recall. I can get back to you on that.
We bought our.
I think you prepaid it. I don't, I'd have to look back, Alan. I mean, I know we talked about it with Tom, but I think you prepaid the year for it, but you did it as the ACAS. I'd have to look exactly.
Just, excuse me, I just want to make one announcement. If anyone hasn't voted and wants to vote, we're going to be announcing the results in a little while. Not that there's any competition, but you know.
All right. Any other questions? Again, feel free. This is my email, and my cell phone number. Oh, yep. Somebody waving in the back. Hi.
Yes, has any research been done as to potential impact of the bryozoans on the ultrasound device?
Can you repeat that? I had a hard time hearing it.
Has any research been done as to potential impacts to the bryozoans from the ultrasound device?
I don't know the answer to that, but I can find out. So specifically on protozoans. Okay.
Bryozoans. And we've got bryozoans in cups, and they haven't.
Bryozoans. Gotcha.
We can take a few more questions if there are questions. Any more?
What's a bryozoan?
Bryozoan.
It's a jelly-like mass. It's a colony of organisms that lives together. It's like a freshwater sponge or
Oh, I see now.
Yeah.
I mean, my gut reaction, there'd be no impact on it, again, because of the critical structural resonance of it. It's a more structured type of organism and the power that we're using, but I can certainly find out. Side note, which I didn't really touch on, is the ultrasound is effective at preventing zebra mussel growth. So if you have zebra mussels, we deal with this a lot more with drinking water reservoirs, and the zebra mussels get caught up on the intake grate. Zebra mussels attach to what's called biofilm. So the same stuff that's growing on the bottom of your boat that is going to cause barnacles to grow, that's what zebra mussels attach to. Ultrasound is preventative of having that growth on hard surfaces. Can't do it point blank range on itself, but my father's got boats in Florida, and we put it on the bottom of his dock, then it reduces the barnacle growth. It reduces how much he has to clean it. So ultrasound prevents the biofilm growth on intake grates at drinking water reservoirs that zebra mussels may attach to.
So Devon, I see by the lack of questions, there was very little interest in this topic. But
That means you don't have a lot of zebra mussel issues there, which is great.
But thank you very much for your presentation.
You are welcome. Feel free to reach out, email, call, or get a hold of Alan. He knows how to get a hold of me. And I appreciate your time. Have a great afternoon and rest of your meeting.
Thank you.